Mr. President.
Senator from South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to speak for a few minutes on the Farm Bill, which we're debating this week. 4 years ago, President Obama was elected on the promise of change, the promise to cut the deficit in half in the first year and to get unemployment before the end of his first term below 6%. We all know what happened to those promises. 2 years ago, a wave of Republicans were elected with the promise of cutting spending and borrowing debt. Yet debt has continued to explode, as has spending. We were promised change, but we got more of the status quo, a lot more of it, a lot more spending, borrowing, and debt, to the point where most Americans at this point are deeply concerned about the future of their country. And Americans are still demanding change for good reason. We must change the way business in Washington is done because we're nearly $16 trillion in debt. We talk about the debt all the time, but these numbers are facts. And now we're poised to spend nearly $1 trillion more on a massive farm bill that some people in Washington have the nerve to tell the American people saves money. And I want to talk a little bit about that, because we obviously need to save money. But despite all the fuss about the need to cut spending, the debt ceiling debate, and the fact that we're actually cutting our military, our defenses, to the bone because of our overspending in other areas, let's look at what we've really done this year as a Senate. We've passed a highway bill that spent $13 billion bailing out a highway trust fund because we spent too much there. We've spent another $140 billion in corporate welfare reauthorizing the Export-Import Bank. We've passed an $11 billion Postal Service bailout. And now we're working on a $1 trillion farm bill. No one here can bring up one bill where we've actually cut spending. Yet we know our country is going off a cliff. The Farm Bill supporters are telling us that this bill saves money. But unfortunately, we're using the same smoke and mirror accounting that is often used in Washington. A lot of gimmicks that make it appear less expensive is really an affront to the American people who are demanding less spending and debt. There's absolutely no connection between what some of my colleagues are telling their constituents back home and what they're doing here in Washington as far as cutting spending. They talk about cutting spending, but now they want to pass this farm bill. The farm bill we're debating today will cost, or projected to cost by the Congressional Budget Office, about $1 trillion over the next 10 years. The last farm bill cost $600 billion. This is a 60% increase. And if we're just to look at these numbers, you can understand the rest of the debate. And the Congressional Research Service has confirmed these numbers, that in 2008, we passed a farm bill that was projected to spend over 10 years $604 billion. The bill we're considering today is projected to spend nearly $1 trillion, $969 billion. Yet the folks who are speaking here about the farm bill are telling us this saves some $20 billion. Only in Washington could they look at you in a straight face and say this saves money. Let's talk about how they actually get that figure. Okay, 2008, about $600 billion. This farm bill, about $1 trillion. What happened in the meantime was mostly the President's stimulus package, which spent about $1 trillion, had a lot of money in it for food stamps. It was a short-term, temporary stimulus, supposedly, with a lot of new money for food stamps. Between 2008 and now, we've increased food stamp spending about 400%. 400%. I think that number actually goes back to 2000. But during periods of good economy, low unemployment, we increased food stamps, and we've continued to increase that dramatically over the last few years. So most of this increase was supposed to be a temporary increase in food stamps. So we're actually locking that spending in permanently with this new farm bill, but since it's slightly lower than this temporary increase, the folks speaking to you here today are saying, this is big savings, America. We're saving money on the farm bill. It's actually a 60% increase in the last farm bill. There was only one question here. Does this bill really save money? And the answer is absolutely not. Instead of doing the reforms that we need in the food stamp program, which frankly is about 75% or more of this bill, we're passing a farm bill that locks in what is supposed to be a temporary spending level for food stamps over the next 5 years. What's really in this farm bill? A lot of it is food stamps. There's some foreign aid, some things for climate change, housing and foreclosures, broadband internet. It's really a catch-all for a lot of things. But in order for us to get what we need to do for the farm industry in America, we have to agree to this huge additional increase in these other programs. The stunning expansion of the food stamp program is particularly concerning because now 1 in 7 Americans are on the food stamp program. As I mentioned before, the number of people in the program have increased dramatically, 70% since 2007, 400% since the year 2000. And this, again, was when our economy was good and unemployment was low. We were still increasing. Unfortunately, many politicians are using the food stamp program to buy votes. The small part of the bill that actually deals with farming replaces one form of corporate welfare for another. The bill eliminates the controversial direct payment system, but it replaces it with something that many consider far worse. A new program in this bill called the Agricultural Risk Coverage promises farmers that the government will pay 90% of their expected profit if the market prices decline. Under this scheme, farmers will pay no attention to the laws of supply and demand because the government will guarantee their profits. Americans want less spending and less debt. All the polls we've looked at, National Journal poll just came out and said 74% of Americans believe that the spending on food stamps should either stay the same or decrease, and that the spending on the farm bill, 56%, should stay the same or increase. Yet we're increasing it 60%. It's hard to answer the question of why do we continue to do this, why we continue to spend money, borrow money, talk about the need to cut our debt, yet one program after another we increase spending. I oppose this bill for the reasons that I've talked about. It spends $1 trillion. We need an open debate, which we're being told we're not going to have, that we're not going to have all the amendments that we're talking about that we need to fix this program. So if the leader decides to limit the debate, to limit the amendments, I will absolutely oppose this bill and do everything we can to stop it. But I plead with my colleagues to start telling Americans the truth. This farm bill increases spending, it does not save money, it adds to our debt, and it locks in spending on a program that we need to change, particularly for the beneficiaries of the food stamp program who are not being helped. They're being trapped in a dependent relationship with government indefinitely instead of us doing things that actually help them get a job and improve their status in life. So I encourage my colleagues to oppose this bill. And, Mr. President, I yield back.
Mr. President.
Senator from Indiana.
Mr. President, I rise today to discuss the issue of national security links. A few weeks ago, the world learned that U.S. intelligence agents and partners disrupted an al-Qaeda plot to blow up a civilian aircraft. We are all very familiar with the success of this effort, and we do applaud those involved in preventing a truly horrific terrorist attack. However, my concern today, and since that time, has been that the public has become too familiar with this successful operation. Specifically, due to an intelligence leak, which all the world knows about, the world learned of highly sensitive information, sources, and methods that enabled the United States and its allies to prevent al-Qaeda from striking again. This irresponsible leak jeopardizes future operations and future cooperation with valuable sources and intelligence partners overseas. The release of this information, intentional or not, puts American lives at risk, as well as the lives of those who helped us in this operation. Now, unfortunately, this is not the only recent leak to occur. As a member of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, I am deeply concerned about a troubling rash of leaks exposing classified intelligence information that has come out in the last several weeks. This paints a disturbing picture of this administration's judgment when it comes to national security. There's the questionable Obama administration collaboration with Hollywood, whereby the administration decided to give unprecedented access to filmmakers producing a movie on the bin Laden raid, including the confidential identity of one of our nation's most elite warriors. Discussions with reporters in the aftermath of the raid may have revealed the involvement of the Pakistani doctor who was sentenced to 33 years in prison for treason after playing a critical role in the hunt for bin Laden. The pages of our newspapers virtually every day have highly classified information publicized pertaining to intelligence operations in Yemen and Iran, currently the two most concerning foreign policy challenges that this nation faces. And this is in addition to the frequency with which top administration officials now openly discuss the once highly classified execution of drone strikes in Yemen and other places. All too frequently, as we read these publications, highly placed administration officials are the source of confirmation of previously classified information. Now, sadly, these incidents are not the first time this nation's secrets have spilled onto the streets or into bookstores. The problem stems in part from the media's insatiable desire for information that makes intelligence operations look a lot like something out of a Hollywood script. This media hunger is fed by inexcusable contributions from current and former government officials. Mr. President, I would like to repeat that last statement. This media hunger to publish classified information is inexcusable when it comes from current and former government officials. We now know that investigations by the FBI, CIA, and now 2 special prosecutors are underway. But more must be done to prevent intelligence disclosures from occurring in the first place. Now, Mr. President, the question of whether the White House purposely leaked classified information, as the President refutes, is not my main point. Whether it was intentional or not has little bearing on the result. Highly classified information still got out, and it appears to have been enabled by interviews with senior administration officials. At this time, Mr. President, I take the President at his word that the White House did not purposely leak classified information. But what about his administration leaking it accidentally? Or what about mistakenly? And perhaps the best adjective that might apply here is what about stupidly? There remain a lot of unanswered questions about the White House judgment and whether the actions by this administration, intentional or not, enabled highly sensitive information to become public. The House and Senate Intelligence Committees are working together in a nonpartisan, let me emphasize that, we're working together in a nonpartisan fashion to address this issue. As a member of the committee, I'm working with my colleagues to evaluate a range of reforms, including legislation, in a way to reduce or hopefully eliminate the opportunity for future leaks. I want to commend the Chairman, Chairman Feinstein, and Vice Chairman Chambliss for their efforts and genuine interest in moving forward with this, and I thank them for their leadership on this matter. Our committee, which will work across the aisle with the House Intelligence Committee, will bring forward recommendations, including legislation, to address this growing problem. Now, as the Department of Justice conducts its investigations, we cannot lose sight of important questions that must be answered, such as, but not limited to, the following. Question number one, why did the White House hold a conference call on May 7 with a collection of former national security officials, some of whom are talking heads on network television? That meeting to discuss the confidential operation to disrupt the al-Qaeda bomb plot. Question number two, why is the White House cooperating so candidly with Hollywood filmmakers on a movie about the Osama bin Laden raid, one of the most highly secretive operations in the history of this country? While we don't know the date of the public release of this Hollywood production, we can be sure that any release prior to the November presidential election will fuel a firestorm of accusations of political motives. Why would the confidential identity of an elite U.S. military personnel be released to Hollywood filmmakers? Why would administration officials even talk to reporters or authors writing books or articles about incredibly sensitive operations? Did any administration officials, in the White House or not, authorize the disclosure of classified information? These are just some of the key questions that must be asked in this investigation. There also remain several questions surrounding the current investigations. The appointment of two special prosecutors to lead criminal investigations into the recent leaks is a step forward, but the scope remains unclear, as well as the question of whether we should insist on a special counsel, given the current concerns about the credibility of the Justice Department. Will these investigations focus just on the Yemen and Iran issue, or will the probe leaks involving drone strikes and other leaks that have occurred in the past months be also a target of the investigation? Will White House officials be interviewed as part of these investigations? Which officials will or will not be available to take part in the investigations? Will those who are no longer and former members of the administration or the federal government or those outside of that, also including those reporters in question, will they be part of this investigation? And will emails or phone calls of administration officials be analyzed to identify who spoke with the reporters and authors in question and when? Again, Mr. President, whether these officials are intentionally leaking classified information is not the main point. If they put themselves in situations where they are discussing or confirming classified information, they must also be held accountable. Public pressure is required to shape these investigations and to ensure all our questions about these events are answered, which is why I'm speaking here today. Every day, Mr. President, we have men and women in uniform serving around the globe to protect and defend this great country. And every day, we have intelligence professionals and national security officers working behind the scenes with allies and potential informants to prevent attacks on our country. These leaks undermine all of that hard work and all of those countless sacrifices. Additionally, it risks lives and the success of future operations. Not only must we plug these damaging and irresponsible leaks, but we also must work to do all that we can to eliminate or greatly reduce the opportunity for them to occur in the future. Criminal prosecution and congressional action is not the only solution. We also need public accountability. Administration officials continue to speak off the record with the reporters and authors about classified information even after these recent disclosures. It's a practice that contributes to unwise and harmful consequences. Purposely or accidentally, loose lips can bring about disastrous results. Perhaps the best advice is the saying, you don't have to explain what you don't say. Or maybe it's even simpler than that. Maybe the best advice for those who are privy to confidential information is what former Defense Secretary Robert Gates said, and I paraphrase, just shut the heck up. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
President,
The Majority Leader.
we're going to move just shortly to confirm the judge we had last night, so if everyone would just be at ease. I asked the Senator from Oklahoma, how long are you going to speak?
I will speak in conjunction with the Majority Whip for a short period of time. I don't have a long speech.
You just be patient. We'll get this done
You bet.
very quickly.
Majority Leader.
The matter now before the court is before the court. It goes back a few years. The matter now before this body is the nomination of Judge Hurwitz. Is that right?
Senator is correct.
I yield back all time on this nomination.
Hearing no further debate, all further time is yielded back to questions on the nomination. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The nomination is confirmed.
Majority Leader would permit me to make a brief statement.
I will, just 1 second. I ask now unanimous consent that immediately upon the adoption of a motion to proceed as 3240, there be a period of debate only on the bill until 4 p.m. today, that the Majority Leader be recognized at that time.
Is there objection? Hearing no objection.
Mr. President. Mr. President.
Under the previous order, the Senate will now resume the legislative session. And we'll resume, give me the language. And And we'll resume the consideration of the motion to proceed to S2340, which the clerk will report.
Motion to proceed to calendar number 415, S3240, a bill to reauthorize agriculture programs through 2017 and for other purposes.
Under the previous order, the motion to proceed is agreed to.
Mr. President.
Senator from Tennessee.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thank the Majority Leader. I simply want to say that I did not object to a voice vote on Mr. Hurwitz, for whom because I wanted to make this statement. Last night, I voted for cloture because when I became a senator, the Democrats were blocking an up or down vote on President Bush's judicial nominees, and I said then that I would not do that and did not like doing that, and I've held to that in almost every case since then. I believe nominees for circuit judges in all but extraordinary cases and district judges in every case ought to have an up or down vote by the Senate. So I voted for cloture last night, although if we had had a vote today, I would have voted no against confirmation because of my concerns about Mr. Hurwitz's record on right-to-life issues. Thank you very much. I yield the floor.
The senator from Oklahoma.
I just want to have a note to the record that I would have voted no on this nominee had we had a recorded vote.
Senator from Indiana.
Mr. President, I associate myself with those last two remarks. I would have also voted no. I wished we had had a recorded vote. I wasn't able to understand even what the Majority Leader was saying. It was spoken so softly, but had we had a recorded vote, I would have been listed as no.
Senator from Illinois.
Mr. President, for the record, I wanted to be recorded in the affirmative on the previous nominee.
The senator's vote will so be recorded.
And I come to the floor now with my friend and colleague from the state of Oklahoma, Senator Coburn, to discuss an amendment which we hope to offer to the Farm Bill, which is, I believe, the pending business before the Senate. And I'd say to the Senator, do you wish to go first? Okay, fine. I'll make a brief statement and then yield to my colleague from Oklahoma. I come to the floor today to speak about an amendment I intend to offer with Senator Coburn. Our amendment would reduce the level of premium support for crop insurance policies by 15 percentage points for farmers with an adjusted gross income over $750,000 a year. According to a recent GAO report, the federal government pays, on average, 62% of crop insurance premiums for farmers. Let me put that in perspective. These farmers are buying insurance so that they can protect themselves against the risk of low prices or bad weather. And the premiums that are charged to them are collected to pay to those farmers who collect at the end of the day. 62% of the value of the premiums for the crop insurance are paid by the taxpayers. In other words, a 62% subsidy, federal subsidy, on these premium support payments for crop insurance across America. The amendment which I offer with Senator Coburn would change that. The reason came out very clearly in the GAO report on crop insurance. Last year, the federal government, the taxpayers, spent $7.4 billion to cover that 62% of crop insurance premiums. $7.4 billion in subsidies for crop insurance for farmers. And the amount spent by taxpayers each year has been growing dramatically. To cover roughly the same amount of acres, the federal government paid nearly $2 billion more in 2011 than in 2009 because the value of the crops, the price for the crops, had gone up during that period of time. Further, and this is a point we'd like to make and hope that our colleagues would note, 4% of the most profitable farmers in America, or farming entities, accounted for nearly 1/3 of all the premium support provided by the federal government. This is an indication here on this chart of what we're talking about. The premium subsidies for 3.9% of farmers across America accounted for almost a little over 32%, almost 33% of all the federal premium support subsidy. These are pretty expensive farmers when it comes to the federal subsidy. Facing stark realities, we can't justify continuing to provide this level of premium support to the wealthiest farmers. Net farm income, as I mentioned earlier, has gone up dramatically. In 2011, reaching a record high of $98.1 billion. The USDA forecasts that income will continue to grow at a slightly higher rate than costs over the life of this farm bill, which is before us. And the net income, much like government payments, ag payments, are concentrated in our largest farms. Farm size has a direct impact on the profit margin of the farm. We have many large farms in Illinois, certainly across the country, but we have many smaller farmers too. What's the difference? On a smaller farm with lower income, there's less return, less profit, higher risk. According to the USDA, farms with sales ranging from $100,000 to $175,000 have an average profit margin of 1.2%. You can see they're close to the edge. They need crop insurance. In a bad year, they're wiped out. But take a look at the larger farms. With more than $1 million in sales each year, their average profit margin is 26.8%. There is an economy of scale. There's money to be made. And that's the basis for Senator Coburn and my drawing the line and saying there'll be a reduction in the federal subsidy for crop insurance premiums for the most profitable farms. These larger and wealthier farms can afford to cover more of their own risk, and they should cover more of their own risk. The single largest recipient of crop insurance premium support last year received $2.2 million to cover the federal government's share of the policy to insure nursery crops across 3 counties in Florida at a value of $57.7 million. In another example, an individual received over $1.6 million in premium subsidies to insure corn, potatoes, sugar beets, and wheat across 24 counties in 6 states. The total value of the crops insured, $23.5 million. And back home in Illinois, a limited liability corporation received nearly $1 million in premium subsidies from the federal government to insure corn and soybeans grown in 17 counties across my state. The total value of the crop, $28.4 million. We're not describing small farms by definition. Are you telling me that a producer insuring a crop valued at $57.7 million will stop participating in the crop insurance program if the federal government only pays on average about 50% of the premiums instead of the current 62%? I don't think so. Our amendment is simple and straightforward. If you have an adjusted gross income on your farm at or above $750,000, your premium support will be reduced by 15 percentage points. A provision in the underlying bill increased premium support for beginning farmers. We're taking care of the new farmers and those with smaller farms, and it sets a precedent for differentiating premium support based on need. So it isn't a radical notion by any means. Our amendment takes the same technical approach already accepted in the underlying bill. Further, the ag community is already very familiar with the use of adjusted gross income as it's already applied to Title I programs. We have to draw a line somewhere. Our amendment's common sense reform that limits the future cost of crop insurance programs. Let me reassure producers across America and in my home state of Illinois, this is not an attack on crop insurance. We need crop insurance. Everywhere I go, producers tell me crop insurance is the most important tool the federal government offers farmers to manage risk. I hear them, and I recognize the role crop insurance has played in managing the federal role of providing disaster assistance. So I'll be very clear. This amendment does not exclude anyone from participating in crop insurance. The vast majority of farmers will see absolutely no change in the level of premium support provided by the federal government. This amendment only impacts farmers' largest farms with the highest income, those most able to cover more of their own risk. Why are we doing this? Because we have a deficit, and we need to deal with it in an honest fashion. The underlying Farm Bill saves money in direct payments and other means over a number of years, and I commend Senator Stabenow and Roberts for that effort. What Senator Coburn and I will do over the next 10 years is to reduce the deficit by another $1.2 billion with this simple change limiting the federal subsidy on crop insurance to those wealthiest, largest farmers in America. How can we ask Americans to share in any sacrifice to cut spending or reduce the debt if we cannot summon the political will to ask the wealthiest farm operations to take such a modest cut in the federal subsidy for crop insurance? Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The clerk will report the pending business.
Calendar number 415, S3240, a bill to reauthorize agriculture programs through 2017 and for other purposes.
Senator from Oklahoma.
Thank you. I want to compliment my colleague in outlining very clearly what this amendment does. Farm and ag production in this country is vital, both to the country and to our export markets. We have, through the years, tried many different approaches to make sure we had the stability and the production power in this country for our needs, and also to the many beneficial aspects of our foreign policy where we use agricultural products for that. Imagine if you are a business other than agriculture, and that you have decided that regardless of the mistakes you might make or the uncontrolled variables that might impact your business or the downturn in the economy, that you can actually, with 62% of the government funding, you can buy an insurance policy to guarantee you a profit. And that's what this new Farm Bill has moved to. That's going to be our agricultural program as far as the Senate is looking at it. There's a real differential there between the rest of business and commerce in America and our farm program. I understand the need for that. But this bill actually increases our cost for the crop insurance program by $5.2 billion as it's written. And what the senator from Illinois and I have proposed is a common sense earnings limit that is associated with every other program in Title I that would say, we're going to help you, but we're just not going to help you as much because you therefore, and by your own success, have the means to help yourself. We're going to spend a lot of money over the next 10 years in this Farm Bill on insurance. It's a $94.6 billion, and what Senator Durbin and I are proposing is $1.2 billion in savings for that. A lot of people don't realize the advances that our farmers and the industries that supply them have made. As Senator Durbin pointed out, farm income has been up the last 5 years, and it's projected to continue to increase. Input costs for fertilizer are going down. Input costs for seed and other chemicals are going up. We want a viable farm program. But what we don't want is we don't want the next generation paying for additional wealth for those that in fact can afford to insure themselves. This is a very modest proposal. I mean, we could have had an amendment that said if you make over $750,000, we shouldn't be subsidizing any of your crop insurance. We would still have a crop insurance program for this very well-off 4% had we done that. What we said is now's the time to start looking at that. We'll look at it again with the next Farm Bill. But certainly those that are so well positioned to maximize profits off of agriculture don't need a 62% subsidy to their crop insurance. And so this is a controversial amendment. We understand that. We know a lot of people are going to disagree with us. But the point is at how much income should you be able to make, should the average hard-working American still be paying taxes to supplement your income? And that's really the question. Is a factory worker making $45,000 a year, should they continue to supplement somebody that's making $10 or $12 or $15 million a year through a crop insurance program. So we're not taking it away. All we're saying is this needs to be moderated, and moderated in a manner that won't impact anybody except this top 4%. And if we do that, what we'll do is start solving, as the senator from Illinois said, start solving some of our budget. It's not a lot compared to what our problems are, but the way you get out of trillion-dollar deficits is $1 billion at a time. And what we're asking, and what all of us are going to be asking over the next 2 to 3 years of everybody in this country, is to sacrifice some. And so what Senator Durbin and I are doing is saying to the best, to the most efficient, to those that make the most money, we want you to start sacrificing now by limiting by 15% the subsidy that comes to you for this bill. I think it's common sense. It's also fair. I would have gone further in a lot of areas, but I think we have an agreement that this is something that we should do, we can do, and it will have no negative impact in terms of our production agriculture, in terms of quantity or quality. And with that, I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Tennessee.
Have the senators finished their colloquy? Thank you, Mr. President. I want to speak for a moment about clean air. Over the last several years, first as governor of Tennessee, later as United States Senator, I have learned that healthier air also means better jobs for Tennesseans. That's why I intend to vote to uphold a clean air rule that requires utilities in other states to install the same pollution control equipment that the Tennessee Valley Authority is already installing on coal-fired power plants in the TVA region. TVA alone, Mr. President, can't clean up our air. Tennessee is bordered by more states than any other state. We are literally surrounded by our neighbors' smokestacks. If we in Tennessee want more Nissan plants and more Volkswagen plants, we'll have to stop dirty air from blowing into Tennessee, and here's why. Back in 1980, I was governor then, Nissan came to Tennessee. The first thing the Nissan executives did was to go down to the State Air Quality Board and apply for an air quality permit for their paint emissions plant. If the air in the Nashville area had been so dirty that Nissan couldn't have gotten an air quality permit for additional emissions, Nissan would have gone to Georgia, and we would not be able to say today that 1/3 of our manufacturing jobs in Tennessee are auto jobs. Every one of Tennessee's major metropolitan areas is struggling today to meet the standards that govern whether industries can acquire the air quality permits that they need to locate in our state. I once asked the Sevierville Chamber of Commerce leaders to name their top priority. They said to me, clean air. Now, Sevierville is not necessarily a hotbed of left-wing radicals. Sevier County is the most Republican county in the state. It's nestled right up against the Great Smoky Mountain National Park. It's where Dolly Parton was born. I live in the next county, right up next to the Great Smoky Mountain National Park. East Tennesseans know that 9 million visitors come each year to see the Great Smoky Mountains, not to see the Great Smoggy Mountains. And we want those tourist dollars and the jobs they bring to keep coming. Despite a lot of progress, the Great Smokies still is one of the most polluted national parks in America. Standing on Clingman's Dome, our highest peak, it's about 6,652 feet, you should be able to see about 100 miles through the natural blue haze about which the Cherokees used to sing. Yet today, on a smoggy day, you can see only 24 miles. Mr. President, there are 546 Tennesseans who work today in coal mining in our state. That's according to the Energy Information Administration. Every single one of those jobs is important. This has been an important tradition in a few counties in East Tennessee. But at the same time, there are 1,200 Tennesseans who work at the Alstom plants in Knoxville and Chattanooga. that will supply the country with most of the pollution control equipment required by this rule. Every one of those Tennesseans' jobs is important, too. Of the 5 worst cities for asthma in the United States, according to the Asthma and Allergy Foundation of America, 3 of those are in Tennessee. They're Memphis, Chattanooga, and Knoxville. And only last year, Nashville dropped out of the top 10 worst U.S. cities for asthma. Because of high levels of mercury, health advisories warn against eating fish caught in many of Tennessee's streams. Nationally, mercury causes brain damage in more than 315,000 children each year, according to the Mount Sinai School of Medicine. It also contributes to mental retardation. Half of the United States man-made mercury comes from coal-fired power plants. This new rule requires removing 90% of this mercury. The rule also controls 186 other hazardous pollutants, including arsenic, acid gases, and toxic materials, toxic metals. Utilities have known that this was coming since 1990 because these pollutants, these 187 pollutants, including mercury, are specifically identified in the 1990 amendments to the Clean Air Act as amendments that need to be controlled by utilities. And now the federal courts have added their weight and ordered the Environmental Protection Administration to control these pollutants. An added benefit of the rule is that the equipment installed to control these hazardous pollutants will also capture fine particles, a major source of respiratory diseases that is primarily regulated under another part of the Clean Air Act. This new equipment will add a few dollars a month to residential electric bills. The EPA estimates a 3% increase nationwide. But, Mr. President, because the Tennessee Valley Authority has already committed to install these pollution controls, the customers of TVA will pay this rate increase anyway, with the rule or without the rule. To reduce the costs, the senator from Arkansas, Senator Pryor, and I will introduce legislation to allow utilities 6 years to comply with the rules, which is a timeline that many utilities have requested. Now, earlier today, the senator from Oklahoma, who's sponsoring a resolution to overturn the rule, referred to the legislation which Senator Pryor and I offer as a cover amendment and suggested in some way that it wasn't a sincere effort. Mr. President, I greatly respect the senator from Oklahoma. Sometimes we have different points of view, but I have different points of view with the senator from Minnesota, the senator from Arkansas, the senator from almost every place in the country. But I respect those different points of view, just as I respect Senator Inhofe's different point of view. But I hope he will respect mine, and here's mine. Ever since I've been in the United States Senate, I've introduced legislation to clean up the air in Tennessee. Why have I done that? Because we don't want the great smoggy mountains. We want the great Smoky Mountains. We don't want to perpetually have 3 of the top 5 asthma cities in the country. We don't like health advisory warnings in our streams so we can't eat our fish. And especially, Mr. President, we don't want in Memphis, for example, for the Memphis Chamber of Commerce to recruit another auto plant to the big Memphis mega site and be told that they can't come there because the Memphis area doesn't qualify for a clean air permit because of its dirty air, especially that dirty air is blowing in from another state. So what this rule is about is requiring our neighbors and the rest of the country to do the same thing we're already doing. And if they don't do it, we have no chance in the world ever to have clean air in Tennessee. And if we don't, we'll have worse health and we'll have fewer jobs. Now, as far as the 6 years goes, the law gives states the right to add a 4th year to the 3 years utilities have to comply with the law. The federal law today gives the President of the United States the right to add 2 more years to that. That's 6. So in the law today, the President and the states could make sure that utilities have 6 years to comply with this rule. I believe that makes sense. If I were the king and could wave a magic wand, that's what I would do. And why would I do that? Because we're getting the environmental benefit over the 6 years. So what will happen is utilities will assess their coal plants. They will decide which ones are too old or too expensive to operate. They will decide within 3 years to close those that they're not going to continue to operate. And then they'll have 6 years to spread the cost of implementing the expensive pollution control equipment, most of it's called SCRs and scrubbers, on their coal-fired power plants. Most of the utilities have suggested this 6-year timeline as the single best way to clean the air and to do it in a way that has the least effect on electric bills. So we'll introduce our legislation to give a utility executive 6 years to implement the rule, but we'll also write President Obama a letter and urge him to grant the 6 years so utility executives can have that certainty. Mr. President, some are saying that this rule is anti-coal. I say that it is pro-coal in this sense because it guarantees coal a future in our clean energy mix. The Tennessee Valley Authority, as I have said, has decided to put on all of the coal plants it continues to operate the pollution control equipment it needs to make coal clean. That doesn't count carbon. That accounts all the hazardous pollutants. It counts sulfur, nitrogen, mercury, arsenic, those things. That means that long-term, the TVA will be producing more than a third of its electricity from clean coal. That guarantees its future for the foreseeable future in our region. And this is the largest public utility in the world. The rest of our electricity in the Tennessee Valley will come from even cleaner natural gas and from pollution-free nuclear power and hydropower. Mr. President, ever since Tennesseans elected me to the United States Senate, which was about 10 years ago, I have worked hard to clean up our air. Tennesseans know that. Most of them agree with me. They thank me for it when I go home on weekends. They do that because they know that if I do not help clean up our air in Tennessee, if I don't stop dirty air from blowing in to our state from other states who don't have pollution controls on their coal plants, that it jeopardizes our health and it jeopardizes our opportunity to continue to be one of the nation's leading states in attracting auto jobs and in attracting tourism. Mr. President, I notice on the Senate floor the senator from Arkansas, Senator Pryor, and I thank him for his leadership on the issue, and I thank him for his practical attitude. We have the same goals, I believe, which are clean the air, number one, but keep the electric bills down at the lowest possible cost. And we believe we have the most constructive proposal to do that. We hope President Obama will agree with us. We hope first the Senate will agree with us and uphold the rule. That second, the President will agree with us and grant 6 years. And third, if he does not, that the Congress will agree with us and pass a law giving utilities 6 years to spread out the cost. I thank the President, and I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Arkansas.
I would ask that I be given 10 minutes to speak as if in morning business.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to commend my colleague from Tennessee and his leadership when it comes to clean air. He does have a long history of fighting for clean air in Tennessee and in this country, and we do share the common goal of maintaining a safe and reliable source of electricity, but also one that's safe for human health. Cleaner air means better health for Arkansans, for Tennesseans, for everyone in the entire country. You know, this all started back in 1990 with some Clean Air Act amendments signed by President George H.W. Bush that authorized the EPA to regulate hazardous air pollutant emissions from power plants. Now, these regulations have been 2 decades in the making. It started back in 1990, as I said. A lot has changed since then, but one thing that has improved greatly since then is technology. And these clean air rules to try to make these coal-fired power plants 90% cleaner, they can now achieve that 90% reduction from uncontrolled emissions of mercury and other pollutants because of technology. We have the ability to make this achievable today. I don't know if that was true 20 years ago, but it is certainly true today. So I'd like to just visit with my colleagues for the next few minutes about the plan that Senator Alexander has put forward that I heartily join him in. It's really a 3-step plan. First, vote no on Senator Inhofe's resolution that we understand will come up sometime in the next several days. Second is consider voting for the legislation that we are proposing and that we'd like to move to the Senate floor within a reasonable amount of time that would basically say that all the utility companies get 6 years to comply with these new rules. Again, these new rules have been 20 years in the making that are now on the books and been on the books since February. And also the third step is we are proposing a letter to the President of the United States to urge him in the interim, to urge him to give the additional 2 years, which he has the authority to do under the law. He can do 2 years with an executive order. And let me just walk through those very quickly. Some of the reasons why I'm going to vote no on Senator Inhofe's resolution of disapproval is because although I feel that the EPA is wrong in their timetable, I think that 3 years is too short. I don't think that's enough time. As Senator Alexander said a few moments ago, you can do the math that's in the statute and in the regulations, and it probably adds up to 6 years. Let's go ahead and just be up front and give them the 6 years and just say, you know, 6 years will do it. That creates certainty. That means people can plan. That means that people can schedule equipment and skilled laborers that come from the U.S., not outsourced from overseas, but folks here that come from the U.S. and the equipment, most of it will be made in the U.S., and that gives our utility companies time to do all this. I think the EPA is wrong in the sense that they're trying to force this over a 3-year period. I think 4 is a minimum, and really 6 is what you really need, and I think that just makes the most sense under the circumstances. Another thing is, with all due respect to Senator Inhofe, who I have a lot of respect for, his resolution of disapproval is wrong. I think it's the wrong approach. I think it's over the top. It reverses course, and it basically, if I understand it, it allows the utility companies to pollute at will. And it actually creates a legal problem that I'm not sure we've adequately discussed here on the floor, and I'm sure we will as we go through this process and as Senator Inhofe's resolution actually comes to the floor, but it creates a legal problem. If it were to pass, you know, what does the future hold? The law says that if a resolution of disapproval passes, then the agency cannot put forward a substantially similar regulation. Well, what does that mean in this circumstance? There's no legal precedent for that. Some argue that if the resolution of disapproval passes, that it's Katie bar the door, that there's no holds barred, so to speak, when it comes to oil and coal plants and what they can produce. I certainly hope that's not the case. I don't know if that's the case, but legal experts disagree, and I don't think that that is a chance that we should take. There's no doubt that sending plumes of mercury and particulate matter and things like sulfur dioxide, et cetera, creates serious health hazards for children and for adults. And you can look at the statistics when it comes to heart attacks or premature deaths, asthma, all kinds of different ailments that human beings suffer. There's no doubt that these coal-fired plants contribute to that. And as we've seen, when we grandfather these plants, they don't out of the goodness of their heart, do the things necessary to stop the polluting. What they do is they keep running them because they're grandfathered. And that needs to stop at some point in the future, too, and I think that our approach really helps in that way as well. And the third thing I'd like to say, I talked about the EPA being wrong. I talk about Senator Inhofe having the wrong approach on his. But the third way is I'd say let's extend it, not end it. And basically, I think by us giving the President or making clear that we want the full 6 years, that's the 3 years in the statute, the 1 year from the state, the 2 years that the President has discretion on, I think that 6 years gives everybody ample time to plan, take care of the business as they should, and make sure that we have the electricity capacity in this country. And also, I'd say we need to stop the scare tactics about jobs and the sky's falling and this is the end of the coal industry in America. I completely disagree with that. I think that the U.S. would be very smart to continue to use coal because we have something like 400 years worth of coal. We're kind of like the Saudi Arabia of coal. And so I'm not trying to hurt the coal industry. I'm not trying to kill jobs or do anything like that. But I think if we look at the small costs, you have to understand that these plants are worth billions and billions of dollars. And we are talking about adding some cost to that. One estimate I saw is it's going to add about 3%. But if you look at the balancing the cost of what we're trying to accomplish here versus the health costs and savings that we get, it's really no comparison. I think it's fair to say that what the Alexander approach does is it actually it saves kids' lives. It is good for business. It's good for our environment. It's good for our people. And I think what we see here is a false choice that some people are trying to present. Some people say you have to be either pro-coal or pro-health. And that's a false choice. You can be both. You can be both pro-coal and have a good, robust coal industry. If you open a magazine here in Washington or the Washington Post, oftentimes you'll see a full-page ad that talks about clean coal. Turn on television, watch some of the news shows. The coal industry is advertising clean coal. What are they talking about? This is what they're talking about. They're talking about cleaning up these coal plants so we can still use this precious American resource, but we do it in such a way that we eliminate 90% of the pollution and the harmful particulates that are in coal. 90%. That's clean coal. That's what they're talking about. So let's do this, but let's do this over a 6-year period, not over a 3 or 4 year period. And let's not force ourselves into a false choice. Let's do the right thing for this generation and the generations to come.
Mr. President.
Senator from Tennessee.
I'd like to congratulate the Senator from Arkansas for his very clear explanation of what we're